The end of the year is coming up, and with that, the Game of the Year will be awarded very soon. And what a fantastic year for gaming it has been. So let's take a trip down memory lane and rank all the past Game of the Year winners from worst to best. Let me know your ranking down below and drop an early like, as I do lists like this all the time, so if you enjoy them, please consider subscribing, as my video ranking all of this year's nominations is coming out very soon, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, let's get to the ranking, starting with Madden NFL 2004. This game was last place on my list last year and will continue being in this spot. Even though I've never been a big sports games fan, I can't deny the impact this game has made on so many people, like a lot of you commented down below last time, telling me just how important and impactful this game was for you. And I think that is exactly what gaming is really all about, bringing people together in a way that will stick in your memories forever. And it builds a community like no other. This is the only time where a sports game got nominated, and as such also the only time a sports game actually won the award. And back in 2003 when this game came out, we were still in the early era of sports games. There was still a lot of innovation and improvements being made compared to how sports games are nowadays, with the same slop they release every year with very minor changes. All of this aside, Madden 2004 is really fun and definitely worth checking out if you still have it. But unfortunately, this game is in last place and will most likely continue to be in this spot for the years to come. Which doesn't mean it's a bad game at all, but just my least favorite of all the winners. Coming right off the oldest game on the list, we move on to the newest addition to the list, with last year's winner Astrobot. I found this game to be just alright, but for sure not up to the levels of some of the other winners on the list. And overall, I think its competition in 2024 was just mediocre, nothing more than that. I mean, one of the contenders was an Elden Ring DLC, which was really great, but shouldn't even have been nominated in the first place. And I think that Black Myth Wukong was just slightly better than Astrobot, but it could have really gone either way. And I think even if Black Myth Wukong won, it wouldn't have really gone much higher than Astrobot is on the list right now. And while Astrobot is an absolutely fantastic platformer and is overall a really solid game, I just think it lacks a lot of the elements that makes the games that win the award so special, like a great story being told. And Astrobot has practically zero to no focus on telling an impactful story at all. But all of this aside, I don't want to be too negative about this game, as I do really enjoy it as a great platformer with a lot of fantastic levels, but so many other winners of the award have been so much better than this game, so that's why it goes in 21st. Up next is Overwatch, which won back in 2016. This one took actually a lot of people by surprise, and to be honest, this is one of the weirder ones to actually win the award. Mainly because it is a live service multiplayer game, and while I have to admit that in last year's video I might have been a little bit too harsh on this fact alone, I do still feel like this is one of the weirder games on the list, as every other game you can still experience in the exact state that it won the award in, while with Overwatch, due to it constantly changing, you will never be able to play it in the original Game of the Year winning state. But all of this aside, I do have to say, 2016 Overwatch might have been my favorite version of a hero shooter of all time. And the amount of care they put into all the characters is something that, in my opinion, we haven't often seen since. As every single hero felt different and had so many unique elements that all came together and made Overwatch such a fun game to play with a group of friends or just by yourself with a bunch of random people. It is quite unfortunate that they could not manage to keep the game up to the standards that they set up for themselves and let the game drop in quality in the next couple of years. But I'm happy to say that it's actually slowly getting back on track again this year, and they are making a lot of improvements to make the game more fun again. After that, we move on to the first game that won the award after the show got rebranded from the Spike Awards into the Game Awards. And that game is Dragon Age Inquisition, that won the award in 2014. Inquisition is my favorite game in the Dragon Age franchise, and I'm pretty sad that Veilguard could not live up to the expectations and ended up being pretty underwhelming overall, lacking a lot of elements that made Inquisition so great. And Inquisition, on the other hand, is a prime example of an RPG done right. The narrative is really solid overall, and the choices you get to make all have an impact that feel natural, and they don't feel limiting at all, as you can make a lot of decisions yourself and aren't forced onto a path you don't want to go on. The combat system of Inquisition is also really great, with the addition of the tactical overview that the previous games didn't have. And this is a great addition to the combat system that already was very solid to begin with, as I am personally not the biggest fan of a game with a turn-based combat system, and the option to play the game at a faster pace made it a lot more enjoyable for me, and having the choice for both without being shoehorned into one or the other makes it so you can choose what you yourself prefer. Inquisition is one of my favorite RPG games, and it's sad that BioWare hasn't been able to make another game on the same level again. At number 18 is It Takes Two. This game is still one of the most deserving games to win the award in recent years, as the passion of all the people that worked on this game just oozes through every part of this game, as the story revolves around fixing a relationship and working together to achieve a goal bigger than just the two individuals. It achieves this not only by the narrative itself, but by weaving this message all throughout the gameplay. So what ends up happening is that you have to work closely together with the other person you are playing the game with. This is what makes It Takes Two such a great game and elevates the story by a lot. The different styles in gameplay it constantly cycles through make this game feel very fresh each time you play it, and prevent it from becoming stale at any point, as all the levels are super unique and aren't based on one gimmick you just keep repeating over and over again. All of this comes together in a beautiful game that is crafted with so much love and care, and it is super heartwarming to see a game like this being made. Up next is The Walking Dead the game. This is a very classic Telltale game set in the Walking Dead universe, and it has all the heartbreaking choices you have to make like you are used to from a Telltale game. It has a lot of iconic scenes all throughout it, and none of them are meant to make you feel happy, which is obviously what they are going for. So this they achieve very well. And I did replay this game recently for this video, and while I'm still not the biggest fan of these types of games, as I think for how strong the story is, it lacks a lot to be desired in the gameplay parts of the game, as it relies very heavily on the use of quicktime events, which I'm personally not a very big fan of at all. And even if I do get that the point of these games is not to have the most groundbreaking gameplay you will ever experience, but instead have a deeply personal story being told, tailored to what decisions you would make in the situations it is set in. I did enjoy the game more than I remember upon replaying it, and that's why The Walking Dead jumps over It Takes Two compared to last year. This next game is still one of the most controversial games of recent history, and that is The Last of Us Part 2. And while I don't love this game, it's not because of the reasons you might think. I used to be a very big believer that the biggest issue of this game was the pacing and not so much the story beats themselves. And if they made the game to be played out in a more chronological order, so that you could actually connect with the many new characters it introduces, it would end up resolving a lot of inconsistencies and reveals in the story. But with the recent addition of the chronological mode of the game, I realized that the pacing is still all over the place, and the story isn't as strong as I thought it would be in this new perspective. This game does portray what violence and destruction the path of revenge brings to not only the people you are against, but also what it does to you and everyone you love and care for, and it does this in an absolutely fantastically heartbreaking way. In the end, The Last of Us Part 2 achieves what it seeks out to do and leaves you feeling miserable all throughout its duration, which is with no doubt purely intentional, but it doesn't make for a very fun gameplay experience overall, and just leaves me wanting more from it, especially if you keep the more upbeat first game in mind. The gameplay is outstanding though, and the encounters with NPCs that actually feel like real people in the way they communicate and work together to take you down is genuinely impressive, and it is some of the most engaging stealth gameplay I have ever played. The Last of Us Part 2 has grown on me a lot over these last couple of years, but I doubt it will go even higher on the list than it is right now. Moving on from one Naughty Dog game onto the only other Naughty Dog game on this list, and that is Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. This game won back in 2009 and is one of the best action-adventure games of all time and was truly revolutionary for its time. It improved so much from its predecessor with some massive improvements to the combat system, big upgrades in quality when it comes to graphics, and the addition of some of the most iconic gameplay sections of all time. The sheer scope of the missions in this game are unmatched in a lot of games coming out to this day. Uncharted 2 pushed the character writing and cinematic storytelling to a new level, blending action, humor and drama in a way few games had ever done. Its unforgettable set pieces, especially the train sequence, became defining moments in gaming history. Even the addition of a fully fledged multiplayer mode showed just how ambitious the project was. So it's no surprise that Uncharted 2 is still regarded as one of the greatest PlayStation titles ever made and a landmark achievement in the action-adventure genre. Up next is the first GTA game on this list, and that is GTA San Andreas, that won all the way back in 2004. And even if it's the lowest rated GTA game on this list, they aren't as far apart as you might be thinking. San Andreas is and will always be one of my favorite games ever made, and is the definition of a chaotic masterpiece. As San Andreas can be all over the place at times, but the way it does it is just perfect, and makes it one of the most enjoyable open world games ever made, as the city of San Andreas is full of life and packed with activities you can do outside of just the main story, which might just be one of the most iconic stories in the franchise. And while I'm still pretty salty about how the remaster of this game was handled, you can still always go back and enjoy the original in the exact same way it came out over 2 decades ago. But what makes San Andreas truly special though was just how ahead of its time it was. This game is not just a great GTA game, it's a landmark title that set the blueprint for so many open world games to come. And up next is another GTA game, and easily the biggest one of them all, GTA 5. This game is absolutely gigantic and even more packed than San Andreas, which in itself is a crazy feat to achieve. But GTA 5 takes all of this to another level, and it makes you feel like you are actually in a full-on city that is lived in by actual people. So much so that even 12 years after its initial release, people are still talking about this game, and not only about the online mode, which is almost as iconic as the single player mode itself. The story of GTA 5 is outstanding in its own right, and with the addition of 3 playable characters that all play a major part in the story, results in an even deeper connection not only to the story, but it also helps develop a lot of immersion and world building. GTA 5 took the world by storm and is one of the most iconic games of all time, and I'm so excited about GTA 6 coming out next year. But moving on, we have back-to-back-to-back GTA games, just like last year, as my opinion on these games remains the same, and that means that GTA 4 is up next. And while GTA 5 is the biggest GTA game in the franchise, GTA 4 is my personal favorite, with especially the storyline of this game being a standout in the franchise, and is in my opinion the most airtight and complete out of all of them. The way they adapt the classic feel-good American dream story into a more twisted and gritty story that feels more realistic than what is depicted in so many other stories in the past is truly outstanding and is the driving point of this game in my opinion, as everything in GTA 4 depends on the immersion of the player into the world through the view of Nico, who perfectly sets the mood of the story and in proxy of the full world itself, as Liberty City is messy, corrupt, and overall a place that makes you feel dirty by just living in it. This shift in mood and setting coming from the other GTA games was a pretty big risk, but I'm glad they took this direction, as GTA 4 has become my favorite game in the franchise over these couple last years. That brings us to the game that won the award the year before GTA 4 did, and that is BioShock, which won the award in 2007. BioShock is a true classic and to this day is one of the best games ever created. The story of BioShock is one of the most airtight and got me hooked from start to finish. As a whole, this is one of the most immersive experiences you can find, with the City of Rapture being a standout in completely sucking you into the world and all the details you can find, not only through direct clues but also through environmental storytelling, which BioShock masters all throughout, and it set a trend for all games coming out after it to follow and adapt in their own worlds. The combat encounters in BioShock are also outstanding, as they provide so much freedom to the player to use their own imagination and take down encounters in so many unique ways, not only with the provided weapons but also with the different abilities you can unlock, and even with the environment itself. This makes every combat section feel unique and makes them stand out even more from each other. Now we're entering the top 10 with Skyrim, that won in 2011. This is the game that dropped the most places compared to last year's ranking, and that is mainly because upon revisiting the game, I found that I just didn't enjoy it as much as I remember I did. And while Skyrim is still one of the best games of all time, I don't think it's in the top 5 territory for me personally anymore. Now, what do I love about this game? It's almost everything actually. The world building is phenomenal, and the world itself is so beautiful and well designed. The combat is super fun and engaging, with so many different abilities you can have in your kit, even if it's a little bit clunky sometimes. But that just makes it great. The RPG elements in Skyrim are some of the best in the genre, and is some of Bethesda's best work they have developed. And even nowadays, Skyrim has one of the biggest and most active modding communities in all of gaming. And now you can improve a lot of quality of life things in the game, but for this video I played through the game vanilla, as this is the state that it won the award in, which does include a lot of the more janky elements of this game, but I think these things just make the game have so much personality. So even though you can change the game to basically whatever you want, I'm ranking this game the way Bethesda released it. And what they released was one of the best RPG games ever made. Now we go all the way back to 2005 with Resident Evil 4, the redefined, more action-focused game in the franchise that took a risk and strayed away from the survival horror genre into this new action-oriented horror game. And I gotta say, it worked out perfectly, as it introduced a lot of people to the Resident Evil games, including myself, that otherwise wouldn't have played the games. This game not only changes the genre, but also the perspective in which you play the game, from a static camera into a free-look third-person view. This was the natural progression of the franchise, as they couldn't keep making the games with a static camera. And later on in Resident Evil 7, they did lean more into the horror genre once again and changed the view to a more claustrophobic first-person view. And now with Requiem, that will release early next year, you can even choose yourself which view out of the two you want to experience the game in. So drop a like if you're excited for that. Anyway, we're talking about Resident Evil 4, right? This is one of the most fun and actually hilarious horror games I've ever played. And while yes, the jokes can be corny at times, I think that's exactly what makes this game so charming and timeless. The world design is great here and really sets the vibe for this game. It takes you from some random village into a beautiful castle, all the way to a lake with a monster in it. And while the combat can be a little outdated at times, it was quite revolutionary for its time. And with the release of the remake a couple of years ago, this does become a lot more noticeable, but the original gameplay is still very much enjoyable, so it just shows how good the original actually is. Now we move on to 1 year after that, 2006, with Oblivion, the second and last Elder Scrolls game on this list. In last year's video I had this game in 10th and Skyrim a lot higher, and I said that I preferred Skyrim over Oblivion. And while in a few aspects I still do, I realized that when I replayed both Oblivion and Skyrim, that Oblivion is just slightly better in my opinion. While Skyrim has a lot of outstanding RPG elements, the foundation of these elements gets created in Oblivion, with a lot of customization elements not even being present in Skyrim. But a lot of my issues with Skyrim still remain here, with my biggest one being the scaling areas that both of these games have, which I'm really not a big fan of, and it does ruin my immersion of these games quite a lot. But one thing that really stood out to me on my replays is just how much more personality Oblivion has compared to Skyrim. The world feels brighter, stranger and more magical than Skyrim's more colder Nordic aesthetics. And the quest lines, especially the Dark Brotherhoods and the Thieves Guild, are still some of the best Bethesda has ever written. On top of that, the magic system and spellmaking offer a level of customization that Skyrim simply doesn't match. Next up is God of War 2018. In last year's video I was a little harsh with my ranking, as I do believe this game tells one of the most impactful father-son stories in all of gaming, and this is also the main driving point of the entire game, as all of it revolves around this new version of Kratos trying to connect with his son in a totally different way from the previous more vicious and less story and character driven games in the series. This shift in tone and direction is one of the best decisions they could have made, as it turned the franchise from just a power fantasy hack and slash into a franchise with deep and nuanced storytelling, and with on top of that a really fun combat system that is highly customizable. Another thing I didn't give enough credit last year was just how groundbreaking its presentation was. The single shot camera brings an incredible sense of immersion, making every moment with Kratos and Atreus feel intimate and meaningful. The shift to Norse mythology also gave the series a completely new identity, with new characters in a completely different setting. I think all of this comes together in a beautifully crafted game with such a heartwarming story, while still honoring the past games in the God of War franchise. And I think last year I focused too much on what game didn't win and didn't give God of War the flowers it deserves. Right outside of the top 5 is Red Dead Redemption. This game won Game of the Year in 2010. The vibes of this game are absolutely unmatched in my opinion, as the more gritty and down-to-earth setting of this game is some of Rockstar's finest work. And the Red Dead series has always been my favorite of the Rockstar franchises, and edges just slightly over the GTA games in my opinion. The story of John Marston is a very intriguing deep dive into the tales of outlaws in a rapidly changing world. These themes make for a very nuanced story mode that is deep and even emotional when it has to be. The world building of Red Dead remains one of the best in all of gaming. It perfectly captures the loneliness of a wandering outlaw and also the chaos it brings with it. It does this all so naturally through the missions and side quests all throughout the game. Red Dead Redemption has become an absolute classic and has been so impactful in terms of world building and storytelling in open world games. Now entering the top 5 with one of the biggest climbers of this year's ranking, and that is Baldur's Gate 3. And this game has the potential to rise even higher to the top. Baldur's Gate 3 is outstanding in nearly every aspect, and last year a lot of people got mad for it only being in 8th place, which in and of itself is very impressive already and makes it, in my opinion, already one of the best games of all time, which it is. But this list is also very subjective, so it comes down to what games I personally think are the best Game of the Year winners. But small rant aside, what this game achieved with the size of the development team it had behind it is truly one of the biggest underdog stories in all of gaming. The amount of passion this small team put into this game is so inspirational, and the amount of detail is absolutely stunning. And while I'm not the biggest fan of the turn-based combat system, I do recognize that it is super well made here and allows for so much freedom to be had. The story of Baldur's Gate is also outstanding, and with all the different choices you get to make and basically mold the narrative in whatever way you want it to be, makes for for one of the greatest stories in all of gaming. And this makes every playthrough of this game feel unique and makes the game overall very replayable. I think what Larian Studios achieved here is nothing short of extraordinary and should be a lesson for other big development studios that passion will bring more success than their greed ever will. Next up in number 4 is Sekiro, the game that won in 2019. This game has my favorite combat system in all of gaming. The parry mechanic is pretty difficult to learn initially, but once you get into the flow of the combat, nothing else will match it in terms of intensity and fun factor. The bosses of this game are some of FromSoft's best, and they fit this game perfectly to match the player in skill and will punish you harshly when you haven't mastered all of the mechanics yet. At times, it sort of becomes a rhythm game where you have to time your blocks and attacks at the perfect time to overcome the toughest bosses. Sekiro isn't only the deep combat though, as it is absolutely gorgeous to look at as well. The art direction of this game is outstanding and immerses you even more into this beautiful world. Overall, there is nothing bad I can say about this game, and it only being in 4th goes to show that these next games are almost flawless as well. Speaking of which, now we enter the top 3, and these games can realistically go in any order, because the difference between these games is so small and they are truly the 3 best games of all time in my opinion. But in 3rd I put Breath of the Wild, which won in 2017. This game has been very revolutionary and impactful for modern open world games, and it changed a lot of design principles for open world games that came out after it, and will continue to influence open world games like this yet to be released. What makes it even more impressive is that this is the first time the Zelda franchise has an actual open world, which makes it even more impressive that they nailed it on their first try. The way they make you able to basically go around and do whatever you want whenever you want to, and aren't really forced to do anything you don't want to do and still be able to complete a game is so refreshing compared to so many other open world games that force you on a path and do missions that you don't really want to do. And Breath of the Wild is different in that it doesn't hold your hand through the entire game and lets you make mistakes and learn from them. This design can now be found in so many other games and is one of the best trends in recent history in my opinion. The pacing of Breath of the Wild is also great, even with the amount of freedom it offers, which is something a lot of other games would fail in. Before this game, I really wasn't the biggest fan of the Zelda games, but Breath of the Wild turned me into a full-on fan of the franchise. Now moving on to 2nd place. This is the game I had in 1st place last year, but this year has dropped down into 2nd, and that is Elden Ring. This game won in 2022 and might be my favorite FromSoft game ever made. Which is funny because the main selling point of this game is that it's basically Dark Souls but open world, but really it is much more than that. This game is absolutely gorgeous to look at with so many unique and different areas. As from the moment you enter the lands between until you finish the entire game, visually this game will never disappoint you, and even more so, no part of this game will ever disappoint you. The bosses in Elden Ring are top notch and even more challenging than some of the previous games. For better or worse, that is. But overall, your first playthrough of Elden Ring is honestly so magical, and I don't know if I will ever experience a game like this ever again. This all comes together so beautifully and makes one of the greatest games of all time. But in 1st place, I have The Witcher 3. This game was in 2nd place in last year's video, but I replayed it recently and it just grew on me even more and became my favorite game of all time. Everything in this game is just perfect to me. The story is crafted so beautifully and is so emotional. Even with a main character that inherently isn't very outspoken or emotionally driven, they can still mold a narrative that gets so much emotion out of you and makes you feel so connected with the characters and the world as a whole. In The Witcher 3, your decisions in the game are actually impactful and change the story in a lot of ways, like major ones like the ending of the game, down to the smaller details like how NPCs in the world interact with you and how they perceive you. The open world itself is absolutely fantastic and densely filled with so much side content. All of these little side quests make exploration so much fun and it feels super rewarding. I find myself just riding my horse through the world and exploring for hours, to a point that I sometimes even forgot about doing the main quests, and I was just going on different side quests. The combat of The Witcher is really fluid and fun, but on the lower difficulties the game doesn't really require you to interact with a lot of the core systems like the alchemy and potions. So I do recommend playing The Witcher 3 on a higher difficulty because researching the strengths and weaknesses of different monsters is really fun. And overall, this game is the best game ever made in my opinion, but do let me know down below what your favorite game is. And if you're interested in this year's nominations, click the video on the screen where I rank them all.